Good evening. You're watching Nightfall News. Tonight, we turn to Sanford, Florida, a city just north of Orlando, where a judge has sentenced a 23-year-old man to death for what prosecutors describe as a cold, calculated execution-style killing. The victim was 18-year-old Kaylin Fiengo. She was a young mother and she was pregnant. She had gone to a park late at night, believing she was meeting the father of her unborn child. She never came home, the man responsible, Donovan L. Faison, has been convicted of first-degree murder for killing Kaylin and of killing an unborn child. A Florida jury voted 11-1 to recommend the death penalty, and the judge agreed. Tonight, we will walk through the case, what happened, how prosecutors proved it, what the law says, and what this crime reveals about violence, control, and the psychology behind a lethal decision. This is our report. In clear terms, here's what this case is about. The people victim, Kaylin Fiengo, 18 years old, a young mother of one, and pregnant again. Defendant, Donovan L. Faison, 23 years old, the father of her unborn child. The allegation. Prosecutors say Faison murdered Kaylin because she refused to get an abortion and because he feared the consequences of her pregnancy while he was living with another woman. The method, according to the state, he lured her to Coastline Park in Sanford, Florida, shot her in what they called an execution-style killing, and left her in her car where police later found her dead. The evidence, text messages where Kaylin told him she was pregnant. His angry replies, including the word abortion. A message to a friend on my brother's grave. I'm gonna crop her out. A documented pattern of arguments about the pregnancy. The fact that they arranged to meet at the park the night she died. The legal outcome. Jury, 11-1 in favor of the death penalty. Convictions. First-degree murder. Killing of an unborn child. Sentence? Death. The human cost, Kaylin gone at 18. Her unborn baby never born. Her 1-year-old son left without his mother. 2 families changed forever. The rest of this report will unpack how we got here. A. Before the crime, the relationship and the pregnancy, Kaylin and Donovan were not strangers. They had a prior relationship and a shared child on the way. At 18, Kaylin was already a mother to a young son. She had graduated high school early as a young mother. Her graduation cap reading, "Mommy did it." Her family describes her as vivacious, loving, funny, and caring. At some point in 2022, Kaylin discovered she was pregnant again. Prosecutors say she sent Faison a photo showing 2 positive pregnancy tests. Rather than sharing the news with excitement or concern, the state says he erupted in anger. He accused her of lying. He sent her a text, abortion. He was, at the time, living with another woman who suspected him of cheating. According to the prosecution, this situation created pressure, not just emotional pressure, but the fear of being exposed, of being held responsible for another child, and of losing the relationship he currently had. In a message to a friend, Faison allegedly wrote, "On my brother's grave, I'm gonna crop her out." Prosecutor Dominic Leo later told jurors that these messages were not empty words, but direct statements of intent. "Phones are an extension of your mind and your body," Leo said. He said he was going to do it. Then he did it. Those texts would become a central pillar of the state's case. B. The night of the killing. November 11, 2022. On the night of November 11, 2022, Sanford police officers were on routine patrol at Coastline Park. They noticed a vehicle backed into a parking spot, a position that can create visibility concerns for officers. When they went to check the car, they found Kaylin in the driver's seat. She had been shot. She was already dead at the time. Officers did not yet know the full context of the killing. They would later learn that Kaylin had gone to the park that night to meet one person, Donovan L. Faison. The two had allegedly been arguing repeatedly about the pregnancy. The state's theory is that Faison asked her to meet there and used that meeting as an opportunity to carry out a premeditated killing from the first moment the officers found her. They treated the scene as a homicide. Kaylin's pregnancy was later confirmed. She had just completed her first trimester. 2 lives ended in that car. See the investigation, 10 months of work. Sanford Police Chief Cecil Smith described the investigation as exhaustive for approximately 10 months. Detectives worked to reconstruct Kaylin's last movements, her communications with Faison, and the digital trail left behind on both of their phones. They examined calls, text messages, social media interactions, patterns of arguments related to the pregnancy. They learned that Kaylin went to Coastline Park the night she was killed to meet Faison. The two had ongoing conflicts over her decision to continue the pregnancy. He had expressed anger, disbelief, and a demand for abortion. Chief Smith later said, "Our investigators have made sure every possible shred of evidence was processed and analyzed in order to bring Kaylin's killer to justice." The investigation ultimately pointed to Faison as the only person with the combination of motive, opportunity, and explicit recorded threats against Kaylin D. The arrest August 2023. In August 2023, close to 10 months after the discovery of Kaylin's body, authorities moved in. Faison was arrested and transported to jail without incident. The charges: first-degree murder for the killing of Kaylin, killing of an unborn child, recognizing the fetus as a separate victim under Florida law. By the time of the arrest, the state had assembled a narrative that painted the killing as premeditated execution style, motivated by a desire to avoid the consequences of her pregnancy. The trial and the jury's recommendation at trial. Prosecutors emphasized several key points: the digital evidence, screenshots, text messages, the abortion message, the "I'm gonna crop her out" text, the sequence of events, Kaylin becoming pregnant, informing Faison, increasing conflict, arranging to meet at the park, her death by a gunshot wound. The nature of the act. Prosecutors Stuart Stone urged jurors to consider the cold, calculated, premeditated nature of the killing. He described it as an execution-style killing. The jury convicted Faison of first-degree murder, killing of an unborn child. Then came the penalty phase. Florida law now allows jurors to recommend the death penalty with a vote of 8-4, one of the lowest thresholds in the country. In this case, the jury went even further. They voted 1-1-1. In favor of death. They accepted that multiple aggravating factors were present: the killing of a pregnant victim, the killing of the unborn child, the premeditated and execution-style nature of the act. The sentencing. A judge follows the jury on Friday. In a Florida courtroom, the judge followed the jury's recommendation. Donovan L. Faison, 23, was formally sentenced to death. Before the sentence was announced, Kaylin's mother, Sarah Schweikert, delivered a victim impact statement. She said, "No words can capture the depth of pain that comes with losing your daughter to murder. Every day I wake up and face a world that no longer has her smile, her laughter, her hugs. The grief never leaves. It sits in my chest like a weight that will never go away." Her father, Ricky Fiengo, spoke earlier to local media, saying he felt devastated and acknowledging that Kaylin's 1-year-old son will grow up without her. "It's going to take a village. It's going to take all of us to help and chip in to raise that child and let that child know how great his mother was." The sentence does not bring Kaylin back, but for her family, it represents what law enforcement and prosecutors often call justice. Q1. Why did the jury recommend the death penalty in this case? Jurors found that the crime met multiple aggravating factors required under Florida law for capital punishment. These included the murder of a pregnant woman, the killing of her unborn child counted as a separate victim, the premeditated execution-style nature of the killing. Prosecutors argued that Faison did not act in sudden rage, but in a calculated way, luring Kaylin to a park and carrying out a planned execution. Q2. What is significant about the 11-1 vote? Florida once required a unanimous jury recommendation for the death penalty, but after jurors were unable to unanimously sentence Parkland shooter Nicholas Cruz to death. The Florida legislature changed the law now. A death recommendation requires a vote of at least 8-4. In this case, the jury's 11-1 vote shows a strong majority agreeing that death was appropriate under the law. Q3. How do text messages factor into modern homicide cases? A digital evidence is increasingly central. As prosecutor Dominic Leo said, phones are an extension of your mind and your body. In this case, the texts gave jurors direct access to Faison's emotional state, evidence of his anger and hostility, possible proof of premeditation, especially the message implying he would crop her out. These messages helped the prosecution argue that his actions at the park were not spontaneous, but the fulfillment of a stated intention. Q4. What charges did Faison face beyond Kaylin's murder? A. In addition to first-degree murder, Faison was convicted of killing an unborn child. This recognizes the fetus as an additional victim, increasing the severity of the crime under Florida law. Q5. What happens next, legally? A. A death sentence triggers an automatic appeals process. Faison's defense will have the opportunity to challenge aspects of the trial, the application of the law, or the sentencing procedure. However, the jury's strong 11-1 recommendation and the judge's agreement create a significant legal barrier for overturning the sentence. 5. Psychological breakdown neutral. Not diagnostic, focused on behavior patterns and understanding a case like this. Experts in psychology and criminology often look at patterns, not labels. Several themes stand out. 1. Reproductive control and violence. The prosecution's narrative is clear. Kaylin's pregnancy became a point of conflict. She wanted to carry the pregnancy. He wanted it terminated. When a partner responds to pregnancy, not with concern or responsibility, but with rage and threats, it can slide into what some describe as reproductive coercion, pressuring, manipulating, or harming someone to control what happens to their body. This does not explain everything, but it provides a framework for understanding how a pregnancy can become a trigger for violence. 2. Fear, image, and pressure. Prosecutors argued Faison felt pressured because he lived with another woman who suspected him of cheating, faced potential emotional and social fallout from being publicly connected to another child and another relationship. People under pressure can respond in one of two broad ways: accepting responsibility, facing consequences, and working through conflict, or in rare but tragic cases, trying to erase the source of pressure. In this narrative, Kaylin and her pregnancy were wrongly viewed by the defendant not as people to care for, but as problems to be removed. 3. Premeditation versus impulse. Anger can be impulsive, but this case, prosecutors said, was not just about impulse. Evidence of premeditation included time to reflect after the pregnancy news, specific texts indicating violent intent, luring her to a specific location at night, the execution-style shot. These factors suggest deliberate decision-making. When someone moves from thinking "I feel trapped" to "I will eliminate the person trapping me," they cross a critical psychological line from fear to premeditated violence. 4. The dehumanization of the victim. 1. Key phrase in this case is the alleged crop her out text. 2. Crop someone out is something we do in photos, erasing them from a picture when applied to a living person. That language can reflect a dangerous mental shift. The victim is no longer seen as a full human being with autonomy, but as a problem, a stain, something to be cut away. Dehumanization often precedes violence. It does not excuse it, but it helps explain how someone can justify doing the unjustifiable. 5. Collateral trauma. This crime did not end with Kaylin's death. Psychologically, trauma radiates outward. A 1-year-old son grows up without his mother. A mother and father live with permanent grief and unanswered questions. A community sees a young woman's life cut short in a violent, public way. Even the defendant's own family must grapple with the reality that someone they love has been condemned for a brutal act. In that sense, the psychological impact of murder is never limited to just two people. Tonight, the name Kaylin Fiengo is more than a headline. She was a daughter, a young mother, a teenager who graduated early with a cap that read, "Mommy did it." Her family calls her vivacious, loving, funny, and caring. They say her loss is an empty hole in my heart that will never heal. Her unborn baby never had a chance to live. Her 1-year-old son will grow up hearing stories about a mother he will barely remember, and in a Florida prison, Donovan L. Faison, now condemned to die, waits under a sentence that reflects what a jury and a judge decided was the only fitting legal response to what he did. Sanford's police chief called the murder senseless, the violence infuriating, and expressed hope that the verdict brings even a small measure of peace to Kaylin's family. It does not restore a life. It does not undo what has been done. But in the eyes of the court, it delivers justice. This has been Nightfall News. I'm your host. Thank you for staying with us tonight. Stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you on our next report.